Last winter we built this, we got this basement finished in. It's not finished yet because I don't have a ceiling in it or anything, but got the sheetrock walls up and the concrete floor put in and some lights and wiring and stuff. And I built that shelf unit over there to hold some of the tools and stuff for the refurbishing of my airplane that I'm going to do, and kind of help straighten things out. Built these two benches over here. They're both 4 foot by 8 foot benches, for work benches. Of course, my wife immediately took those over for her incubators and her little workshop here. The shelf unit over there turned out so nice. Decided we'd build a couple more of them. So we're building 2 more shelf units there. Shelf units are 2 foot by 8 feet and 87 inches tall. And this is one frame that is completed. The frame's completed, and Judy just put the first coat of paint on it. And what we'll do on that is then we still have to do is we'll take some 1/2-inch plywood and rip it in half into 2 by 8 foot sheets and notch out around the 2 by 4 uprights, and then glue and screw them down. That's just exactly what I did with this other unit. Now she's painting it with just latex interior paint, and that's what we did with the other unit over there. But the problem with that is that paint stays sticky, and so all of the stuff that we put on the shelf winds up sticking down to it, even weeks and months after it's been painted. So what we did on this workbench over here is painted the top of this. This one over here was melamine. It's just particle board with a hard surface on it, and that's nice and slick, and I got that to use to work with the fabric on the aircraft when we're working on control surfaces and stuff. And then this one was 3/4 inch plywood top, and we painted it with just floor and deck paint, and it actually turned out just as nice as the melamine one. I actually like the surface on it better. A little bit rougher because of the places where the paint didn't flow out very well, but it's still hard and a real nice finish on that. And the framework was all painted with the same house paint, interior house paint, as that shelf unit was. So that's what we're going to do with these shelves, is we're going to go ahead and paint the frames with blue, light blue or gray house wall paint, and then we'll put the floor and deck paint, porch and deck paint is what it's called, on the hard surfaces of it. So, and here's an unfinished frame here. We've got it, the stretchers on it, and the long pieces on it. As you can see, we took these 2 by 4s, notched them out. Well, first of all, we had these boards were all just slabs. They were 1-inch cutoffs from the log that had live edges on 1 or more sides of them. They're just rough stuff that comes off the log when I'm breaking the log down into cants to make lumber out of. And this is just kind of the pieces that come off between the slab until I get down to the cant. And so the first thing we did was pull these out, and then we ripped them down to put a good edge on it on one side, and ripped them down into rough width, which was about 4 inches, and you run them through the planer and got them cleaned up real nice and got them all to a uniform thickness of 3/4 of an inch. Then I run one edge through the jointer to make sure I had a nice straight edge on it on one edge, and then we ripped the second edge, and we ripped these down to 3 inches wide. So there's 5 these 8 foot long pieces. There's 4 on this one, as we don't have one on the top one yet, but there's 5 of them on each one of these frames, 2 frame panels per unit. And then we cut up a bunch of them here into, these are not 2 foot long, they're 2 foot minus the 3/4 inch for each one of those stretchers, which is 1.5 inches. so they're 22.5 inches long. They fit right in here against this. So we'd let the 8-foot ones hang over, and then we'll butt up the 2-foot ones against here. So they wound up being 22.5 inches to make up for the 3/4 inch width, the thickness of these 8-footers. And you can see it took, they're just plain old 2x4 studs, and there's 2x4s we've salvaged off of old crates and stuff we've got from different places. And so we cut them all 87 inches long, and then I ganged them up 3 to a gang, screwed them together so that one edge was flush, or the bottom end was flush, and then we notched them all out. So there's 3 all mated up with the notches exactly the same, and they're notched out 3/4 of an inch. And actually Carl didn't quite get him exactly 3/4 of an inch deep, but just close enough. And so those are glued and nailed in with 6-penny ring shank nails and just construction adhesive. And then we'll take the 2-foot ones, the 22-inch ones, then, and run from here to the other side, to the other frame, with glue and nails. And once they go together, even without the plywood, oops, that's all wet. Look at that. That was not too bright. Anyway, even without the plywood in them, they're pretty sturdy. Once you get them all together and the glue dried, they're real sturdy. So when you get the plywood on there, glued and screwed down, then they're pretty solid. We got to put another stretcher up there on that top for the top shelf. And then the shelves are spaced, so there's 16-inch space between the shelves, and there'll be actually 15.5 inches between the shelves once we put the plywood on there. And that's just exactly right to fit these yellow totes that we got from Costco. They just slide in there real nice. Now we got a bunch of these other totes down here that we got from Home Depot, and they're not near as nice as the Costco totes, but they're a little bit deeper from top to bottom, and they don't quite fit. They will fit, but just barely slide in there. They fit real nice underneath the bottom one on the floor, but on these other shelves they just don't quite fit in there. What we'll do now is go wash the wet paint off my hand, and then I'll start putting this other pair of frames together and make a shelf unit out of it. We've got the second, actually the third, but the second of what we're doing right now. Frame nailed up. You'll have to finish getting this one painted, and then we'll get some plywood and put the shelves in it. And then this one here will get painted, and so we'll get some plywood today and get it ripped up and notched out for the uprights, and we'll have some new shelves pretty soon. So a couple days for that one to get painted and dried, and then we'll put the shelves on, and then it'll take a day or so for the shelves to get painted and dried. Well, here's the shelf frames all nailed up and painted, and we've got the shelf themselves, plywood. They're cut out and painted on one side. I took and painted the acrylic paint on the bad side, on the D side, although it's hard to tell the D side from the C side on this CDX plywood. So it looks like we got all of them painted. We'll leave one side bare, and then once it's put down, then we'll paint that with porch and deck paint. Well, here's the paint that we're using for the units themselves on the bottom of the shelves. Started putting the shelves in. Showed we had them all cut and set to fit in there. Brought them in here, and we painted the bottom sides of them same color as what we painted the rest of the shelves. Thought that I just cut those and tipped them sideways and slid them in there before, but I guess what I did was I fitted each one of those shelves in that shelf unit over there. As I put the shelf together, put the cross pieces on. So anyway, these shelves the boards wouldn't slide in diagonally, and especially these up here, this top shelf and this shelf, second one from the top. Well, This is the second one from the top here, I guess, and this one would be the third one from the top. I have two spaces that are 16 inches apart, 3 if you count the one from the floor, and then there are 3 shelves, well, 2 shelves that are 12 inches apart, and then the top one will be whatever that is between the ceiling and the top shelf. So anyway, they wouldn't fit in there. What I did was I took these pieces of plywood over and I cut kerfs in it every 1/4 inch, and with the width of the saw blade, the kerf that's left winds up being more than, or less than, a 1/4 inch, more like 1/8 of an inch, a little more than 1/8 of an inch. So anyway, with that kerf cut in there, several of them cut in there, and I poured boiling water in the kerf and on the top and let it soak in, and that allowed me to bend this this 1/2 inch sheet of plywood to the point where I could fold it up and slide it in that opening. And the bottom ones are a little bit easier. I did those right in the middle. Now this one was the first one I did, and it wasn't quite saturated with water all the way through, and hot water is better than cold water, but anyway, it wasn't saturated all the way through, so it wound up splitting a little bit in one of the kerfs, and as it dried, I didn't get it down when it was wet, and as it dried, it buckled up. So I'll have to put some, if I use just pour some boiling water on there, that should come down, or I can use the steam, just a clothes iron on steam, and run it back and forth on there, and get it pliable enough that it'll come down and straighten out. Well, I might have to put my kerfs just a little bit deeper. I run the kerfs just so they're into that top layer of the or the one layer of the plywood, the last layer of the plywood. It probably wouldn't hurt to go just a little bit more, because I'm still fighting glue and stuff. And then to make sure these want to glued down, it winds up being pretty strong. It's still a little flexible there, but to make it as strong as or stronger than the regular piece of plywood, if we just smear construction adhesive in those grooves, once it dries out, just smear those full of construction adhesive. That'll make that that'll strengthen that piece of plywood back up to full strength. Shelf units all together. I just put the last shelf up on top board, but so there's 2 units done. Now they're pretty solid, 2x4. The other thing that make them a little bit more solid would be to wrap the bottom down there on the floor with a 1x or something, so that the legs don't shake down there, but all the weight on that's going to be straight down, so that's not really going to matter any. I screwed up twice on these. Once when I figured out the shelf units, and I stacked them all up and gang cut out the notches for the 2x4s, I forgot that the top two, or the top ones, the top shelf didn't need to be cut out with notches. Anyway, I wound up having to cut another board for a shelf for the top, so it's nice and flat on top. And the other thing I did is I forgot when I built that unit over there that I built it from the bottom up, meaning I put the cross pieces and braces in on the first shelf, and then put the plywood on for the shelf, then put the second one, the third one, so on. Well, these 2 foot wide pieces of plywood wouldn't fit in through the cavity left between those. So I took and run a kerf, or a bunch of kerfs down the plywood, and soaked it with water so it would bend, and bent it, slid them in there. Now the top one, of course, I didn't have to do that with, because it just fits flat on top. So otherwise, now they need to be painted. There she is. Get those 2 units done. Pretty soon we can start stacking stuff on them. Okay, making progress on the shelf front. We've got the shelves all together and all painted. We've got the uprights and the cross pieces painted a gray or light blue, and the top, the shelf parts themselves, are painted white. Shelves are painted with a porch and deck paint, which hardens up pretty good, makes a nice slick surface. And we painted that first shelf we made with this regular latex house or wall paint, and it stays kind of sticky when you put things on the shelf. It winds up sticking to the paint even after several months. It's still sticky. So this porch and deck paint works really good for a work surface. It makes a nice hard work surface. It's smooth. It's real durable. I used it on my workbench in my shop. It worked real well for that. And it's a little bit slippery. It would have turned out a little nicer if I'd used AC plywood for the shelves instead of CDX, but it's twice as expensive. Showed earlier, we got the kerfs cut in these, and so we wound up with a little bit of misshapen on the plywood there. Probably would have been better if we just steamed them a little bit, and then, but even so, when they dried out, they wind up being misshapen a little bit where that kerf was on them. Then we took some 1x4s, 1x3s, 1x4s, put underneath where the kerf was and screwed it in through from the top, and that strengthened that shelf back up. It would have held up okay anyway, but it was still a little bit soft here in the middle where that kerf was, and by putting that 1x4 in there, that stiffened them right up. Each shelf unit is 8 feet long, and we've got them separated 24 inches. You know, we're building these little boxes here, and these will be shelves. We'll screw those up in between the other shelves there, and then we'll.
Beautiful box.
Yeah, this one that one you put the paint side wrong side up.
I know it. I messed up. That was the first one.
She's got 3 shelves done, and 2 more are framed, and they're put plywood on them, and they'll be ready to go in. The shelf all finished and installed, and laying against this wall here. Oh, it's so there's actually 2 units, just identical to that one over there that I made last winter, and so they're 2 8-foot long by 2-foot wide units, and then we took a spread them apart 2 feet and made little shelf units that fit in between them, so we can extended it out an extra 2 feet, so it makes them 18 feet long. We've got 2 shelves that are 16 inches apart, and 2 shelves that are 12 inches apart, and then of course the bottom shelf is also 16 inches off the floor, so we can slide stuff in there that won't be affected by the moisture coming out of the concrete. Hopefully there won't be much out of it, but there always is some. And then of course the top one, there's about 20 inches of room up there on top. Now I've got one more thing that I've decided to do. We've got the shelf units there that first shelf is just the right height to block the outlets, and so there's I don't know, 2 or 3 outlets back there that are blocked behind the shelf units. And I was going to get what we did here on this other one is we got a surge protector, an outlet extension, and stuck out there and put on the wall, but I don't really like that. For one thing, you have to have one with a flat connector, a plug to go in there, and they're hard to find. Like these are kind of nice here with a real long, nice well, there it is, but real long, got lots of outlets on it, but it's still only a 14 gauge outlet, and it has a regular plug on it which sticks out from the wall. So what I think I'm going to do on those is pull those out from the wall a little bit, take that cover off, and take that outlet out of there, and bring it out over here to the post, so it's out and it's accessible, because we'll need those outlets for doing different things. Those shelves I think are going to be a pretty much permanent fixture here. This is paint we used on it. Here's just Easy Care Ultra Premium paint and primer all in one, and it's a light blue or gray color, semi-gloss. That was for the fields, And then this is what we used for the shelves units themselves. Interior, exterior, porch and floor is gloss, polyurethane, enamel, and it hardens up real good. That's what this bench here is melamine, and then this one here is just plywood with that floor enamel on it, porch and floor enamel, and it's actually more durable, I think, than the melamine is. So